Next up, we're going to talk about a choice facing internal comms around leading or following. Simon Cavendish, chair of IABC EMENA and a senior IC consultant, published a bit of a provocative post on LinkedIn, and it centers around this. Internal comms has become addicted to alignment, even when alignment is the wrong goal. The argument is that the profession's identity as, quote unquote, the conscience of the organization has morphed into something safer and more comfortable than it sounds, a way to stay nice instead of necessary. One line in there is blunt. Too many IC teams end up producing beautifully crafted messages for fundamentally bad decisions. Simon distinguishes between diplomacy and deference and says the profession is conflating the two. The goal of maintaining access to leadership, he argues, has become more important than actually using that access to push back. Being in the room isn't the win. What we do in the room is the win. That's the quote. He says the future of internal comms belongs to challengers, not caretakers. IC teams that operate as internal agencies are setting themselves up to be optional. This isn't a new argument necessarily in IC circles, but I think Simon has made this a bit more blunt than most have. My question to you, Jenni, is very simple here. Agree or disagree with Simon's take?
So I agree with Simon's take because I loved the way he wrote this. When I was reading the article, it was a beautifully written, beautifully crafted message for what is a brilliant decision. His use of language around things like being nice and stuff like that, I think is a huge issue for internal comms. This needs to be the conscience of the organization. It tracks to something I was talking about a little while ago around that's not your decision in internal comms. I think I was having a freak out about one of the professional bodies asking internal comms people to talk about how we look after employees who are sick. And I'm like, that's not internal comms. Like, that's not the job. And I think it's got really confused about what it is. It's too, people are really worried about saying the wrong thing. And to me, a lot of this comes back to professional development, right? I'm a big advocate of professional development in whatever capacity that is. But if you're not doing the work to have the belief in yourself, to have those challenging conversations or that judgment or all of those things, then Simon's right. The being in the room isn't the win. It's what you do in that room that is the win. So if you're just focused on getting there and then you're getting there and not saying anything or doing anything and just being nice and going, that's a lovely idea, let's go and do this. And inside you're thinking, I'm not sure it is. That just isn't the role of an internal comms person. And that has been, I think, to your point, it's not a new argument. It's been a frustration for a number of years in the profession.
Yeah. Yeah, I love his point. I want to throw up in my mouth a little bit when I say like seat at the table, because that's one of those things that people talk about way too long. But I like his point about being in the room. Yeah. And this goes back to an article that we talked about the week before about disagreeing with your CEO and having access to leadership is a privilege. What do you then do with that privilege? So his point around being in the room isn't the win. What we do in the room is the win. So what are you doing with that access? What are you doing with that privilege? If you're just nodding along and agreeing, again, to last week's conversation, you're complicit in it. And we end up being nice instead of necessary. I think that's another good alliteration to play off the role of communicators, how to become necessary and not just nice. That conscience of the organization sounds really great, but if you're doing nothing with it, then what are you doing?
Yeah. And he makes such a good point about the fact that this is forgettable. You cannot have that. If you're just playing that nice game and doing that, people are going to be like, we're good without that. We don't need you. We're fine. Whereas you have to become necessary. And you can only become necessary if you're talking the language of the business, you understand the organization, and you can advise, and if you can't do that, then that's making it really difficult for you to do your job. And I'm not saying that's all internal communicators. There's a lot of internal communicators who are creating content, managing digital channels. They aren't doing that leadership advisory piece. You've still got to be brilliant at that and know what's going on. But if you want to step into that space, that consultancy advisory space, working with leaders, you do not have the luxury of just being nice. And if you're in that position, you are in a leadership position, and therefore it is your duty to make those calls and say those things. Otherwise, you're not leading because you're not making the hard choices and the difficult choices.